Muy buenas noches a todos, aquí con ustedes su servidora abogada Lina, y como todos los miércoles hemos estado hablando, ¿no?, con candidatos para el Consejo a los diferentes distritos de Nueva York. Queda menos de un mes para las elecciones primarias, el 22 de junio, y la carrera por representar el Distrito 22, que cubre Astoria, Rikers Island, partes de Jackson Heights, Woodside y East Elmhurst. Pues la carrera para representar este distrito sigue súper llena de candidatos, con 8 personas que actualmente se postularon para la candidatura, para suceder al concejal de la ciudad, del distrito, que se llama Costa Constantinides. Una republicana, un independiente. Hoy tenemos a FELICIA KALAN, quien es la única republicana que se ha postulado para este puesto, que es súper importante. Es un distrito muy importante donde hay mucha diversidad, donde hay muchísimos latinos también y muchísimos griegos. Entonces, me complace muchísimo dar la bienvenida a FELICIA KALAN. FELICIA, welcome.
Thank you so much. Hola, todas. Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and if you have a little bit of your Spanish that you want to use, now.
You know, I speak French, but no Spanish. I just understand Spanish a little, but hola to everyone.
Okay, Felicia, I was telling folks that District 22, you know, your district is, of course, Astoria, Rikers Island, parts of Jackson Heights, not all of Jackson Heights, Woodside, Elmhurst, and you're hoping to succeed Kostas Konstantinides, whose term is up.
Correct. Yes.
And I also said that there's an independent. I believe there's eight individuals, right? And there's one independent, and there's you, the lone Republican. So let's get to it, Felicia.
Absolutely.
You and I have been talking online, and we were having a super interesting conversation, which we'll replicate for the recording. But so one thing I didn't talk to you about before is what made you run? You're a mother of 2. First of all, I also said it on my welcoming. You're a mother of 2 who is a business owner. What makes a mother of 2 say one day, "Oh my God, this is what I want to do"? What happened?
Absolutely. Well, you know, for me, running for office was the next step in loving and serving people. So actually, my husband is also a pastor of a church. When we came to Astoria, he was helping launch a church called Journey Astoria. And so for me, wanting to love and serve my neighbors, I started to explore what it would look like to serve them at City Hall. And, you know, I was getting very frustrated as a mom of 2 navigating the education system. And for me, running for office is really about real representation and fighting for children and families. And, you know, this is just a natural next step for me to love and serve people and to put people first.
That's awesome. And have you been a resident of District 22 for a while?
No, actually, we've only been here about 4 years.
Okay.
So where I always say I didn't grow up in the district, but my children are growing up in the district, and I have a 6- and 5-year-old. So my daughter Zaria is 100% Queens. But it's a beautiful place to raise a family, and you know, it's a very special place for us for a lot of reasons.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's very important. Felicia, you and I were talking before about what I really liked about your campaign logo, people before politics, right? You're the lone Republican, and I believe that in New York we need to talk about how we're going to help people, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So tell us about your platform a little bit, as far as why should people care? Why should you appeal to everybody, right? Because you're going to say people, "Oh my God, well, she's a Republican," and
right.
We're gonna sort of like connect you to people that we don't necessarily like.
Yeah.
But I really like the idea of let's just talk about people's platforms and see if you agree with the platform, and if you're not a Republican,
Right.
Why would we want to vote for you? Like, what is it about you that is appealing to everybody?
I love that question. It's such a great question. And I'll say, number one, I'm not running for a Republican agenda or a Democrat agenda or a socialist agenda. You know, for me, I'm running as a woman, I'm running as a mother, I'm running as a resident of Astoria. I wish there was no political party on the ballot, but there is. And I'm a person of very deep conviction. And I always say this to people. I have a lot of friends on both sides, and we're living in such a divisive time politically. But I think there's a huge misunderstanding, and I'll explain what I mean. I believe that Republicans, the people who tend to gravitate towards the Republican Party, are people who really value freedom. And the people who gravitate towards the Democrat Party are people who really, really value equality. And I am a person who values both. You know, I care about our constitutional rights and the limited power of government, which is traditionally the Republican Party. And I also care about fighting for equality and ending cyclical poverty and fighting for working families. I grew up in a single mom household. Right. You know, I know what it's like to struggle. I also have children. You know, we've gone through a lot of ups and downs. And, you know, I believe that when we empower people and we also, you know, give them a proper footing, and, you know, I think the pandemic has shown, you know, there's certain times, and I'll say certainly for like shutting down businesses, when we have to evaluate the power of government in our everyday lives. And so it's those two things that I find myself in the middle. And so I think that that's what differentiates me from a lot of other candidates just as a person. But I will say my number one priority coming in as a mother is safe and clean streets. I think for what we're getting with $88 billion, we should have safety and we should have sanitation. And we're not getting that. And so I think there's a lot of accountability that needs to happen at the city hall level. Only 3 of the 51 members of city council are Republican. And I do believe that for a functioning democracy, we need balance. And there's no balance at City Hall. Right. And I want to come in and bring that balance, work across the aisle, but also bring accountability and say, hey, we have a rising crime. We have to put safety as a priority. Without safety, how can our businesses rebuild? You know, without safety, we're not going to have families who stay in my district. They'll continue to leave. Right. So safe and clean streets is my number one priority. Definitely quality education, getting our kids back in school, and helping small businesses and incubating new startups to refill our vacant commercial properties. Those are some really important things for me. But it always comes back to safe and clean streets and fighting for the real needs of our community. Because when I talk to people, I've done polling, number one issue is public safety. If the number one issue was something different, that's what I would be fighting for as well. So it's about real representation.
Right. I hear that, and not only have I heard, but everybody, you know, it's been on the news for a while that our crime is going up, right? And crime goes up whenever there's, you know, poverty. People don't really have. I'm not excusing crime. I'm not saying, oh, this is what happened. I'm saying that there's a correlation between that. And so your priority for District 22, if you were, I'll give you 5. What are safety, schools?
Yes.
Is there transportation somewhere in there for District 22 and the bike lane issues? Yeah,
I think, you know, honestly, we have a lot of residents who are complaining about the city bikes as well. So certainly finding a balance between people who are bikers, people who, you know, drive, people who take, you know, the bus and public transportation. We do have to kind of bring everybody to the table and have those discussions and see what our district wants. And again, it's bringing it back to real representation. What does our district want? And making sure that everybody's cued in on those conversations. I think that's really important. So safety, I think sanitation, is really high up there, and I kind of put them together a lot of times, but
Right.
I go out, and we've done this a lot with our church, but we do trash pickups all the time, you know, and really wanting to teach my children personal ownership. I want to expand recycling. I want to redo our trash bins, completely redo every single trash bin in my district, make sure there's lids, because a lot of the times this is city council level stuff. You know, I'm filling the potholes and picking up the trash, you know,
Right.
but for the trash bins that are in our district, they need to be completely redone, because sanitation is important, especially in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
So sanitation, education, you know, we have some really good elementary schools, but we have a lot of work to do when it comes to our middle and high schools. And a lot of families leave right when their children get to the middle school age. So we need to improve our school system, and we also need to lower our class sizes. We have some really high class size rates, and I believe that directly impacts the quality of education our kids receive. And so that's certainly a high priority for me as well,
Right.
when it comes to education.
Has that, do you think, sorry to interrupt, Felicia, do you think that the ratio of students, does have anything to do with building in your district? You know, how many buildings have come up, and the amount of people that need schools versus the schools that are there?
Exactly. Right? We've had a growing population in our districts. Astoria is, you know, it's just rated like a #1 neighborhood. Right. So we've had a growing population, and our schools haven't followed with that growth population. We did have a couple of new schools open up, and we have some add-ons at like PS2, Alfredsenberg. They're building a new, adding on to their building, but. Yeah, and you know, we're going to have to reassess, right? Because we lost a lot of people as well. Some kids have been remote. Well, they just removed the remote option for the fall. So we kind of have to see where our population falls, who's actually left, who's just left for a time. You know, they were upstate and they're coming back. We're going to have to make those decisions. But I think the part that I was very frustrated with as a mom of 2, I had a kindergarten and pre-K student, and I'm very worried that our kids have fallen behind in education. I've certainly seen it in my own children, and I think education is that first ticket to ending cyclical poverty and fighting for equality. And that's a really big concern that I'm going to bring to the table as a city councilwoman to fight for all kids, because we have to make sure that they're caught up if they've fallen behind. We have to make sure that's assessed. But I'll come back to, I think if we had smaller class sizes, I think we could have transitioned our children into schools quicker, into, you know, going back into the classroom. You know, talk to some high school students. This was before the pandemic. Because the population was so big, they had to rotate schedules. So they couldn't actually get a full day of education. And that's just not acceptable. Right.
Yeah, no, it's not acceptable. And I think what's happened with a lot of kids too is that they weren't, quite frankly, ready for the online version of classes. Not to mention, a lot of kids don't really learn that way. They have to be with each other, and they have to be, there's a lot of things that we still don't know. In New York City school, and I went to New York City schools, you know, many years ago, but we don't all learn the same way.
Exactly. And those social and emotional skills are so important. Interpersonal skills, you know, these are really big things. You know, I think for some kids, they've enjoyed parts of it, but like you said, every child learns differently, and the toll that this has taken on families where parents had to become teachers, you know, it was a difficult season. We're seeing the end of it, and I'm thankful for that. Yeah. But I also come with, as a parent, a concern of, have our kids fallen behind?
Right. And as a woman, Felicia, what do you think are the long-term implications? What has this pandemic done to women specifically who were in the workforce?
Yes.
Some women had to leave. You and I were talking before about business owners. I'm very involved in with Noble, who is a community of women business owners. And it's been crazy, right? So what are we gonna what is your vision for how we can, and I'm not asking you how are we going to solve all the problems of the world right now. But when we think about women specifically, and we were also talking about just how awesome it is that there's so many women running for council, right? When we hadn't, and that the diversity really, not just women, but
Yes.
Folks, from the LGBT community, from the Asian community. And it's really, really amazing to see. But I think you would bring such a fresh perspective to the world of a woman who happens, not only a woman, but you're also a woman with 2 little kids, right? Because it's not the same perspective, right?
It's really
and
not.
It's not. You have kids. Like I wouldn't come to see, if I were to run, I don't have any kids. I don't have no idea how, I don't even know how you're doing. I don't even know how you're campaigning. You have 2 kids. It must be so hard. But there's this section of women that are going to be left out. What do you think about how can we help these women overcome what's just happened to them?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question and such an important thing. Like you said, a lot of women had to leave the workforce, especially a lot of women business owners. They were hit not just with the pandemic and the closures, but also having to transition to be a full-time teacher, really.
Right.
So that's created inequity, absolutely. And I think one of the main ways that we can support women, and especially specifically support mothers, is helping with childcare costs. That is, I'll just use my experience as an example. When I had both of my kids in childcare before they went to school in New York, I was paying about $2,000 a month for, I'm talking part-time. Because that's what I could handle. I would do like freelance consulting work. I would put them in childcare, and I couldn't afford the full amount, and I would just work as much as I can. I'd put them to bed. I'd work at night, and that's like women we're juggling a lot, and then then you completely remove childcare, and there's no way to even work. Right. So I think childcare is a huge component. I'm very supportive of 3K for all. I will say another thing that I see an issue in New York City is the way that I would say income is assessed in certain districts. Like, for example, we're in District 30 for our education council districts. But if you're a family who makes a lot less than the average person in that district, you are left out of some of the services. So like 3K for all wasn't available in our districts because, the average person in our district was making, a certain amount. But say you live in the district and you certainly don't hit that amount, you're left out of those services. You couldn't access the 3K for all within our district. So there's some things too that without being a parent, you wouldn't really know what to bring to the table to kind of address some of these inequities in our system. And so I think it's really, 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 really important to support parents moving forward, because I'll tell you, it was very difficult from my personal experience, and it took a toll on families, and it still has, as people try to transition back to work and get their kids back in school. It's challenging. It certainly is. So, and we need that perspective at City Hall, because most of our budget goes to the education system, but how many parents do we have on City Council? So it's important that we're represented.
So this is a good segue to talk about the budget, right? I keep hearing a lot from all the candidates, and I think everyone that I've spoken to, everybody seems very aware of this gigantic thing. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit more about how are we going to bridge? Are we going to, as somebody who's running on the Republican, as a Republican, right? People need to understand sometimes it's like, well, Republicans don't want to spend any money. They want to spend money on this. Mm-hmm. And Democrats are just spenders, they're just one government. They just want to, they're just big spenders, government spenders.
Right.
For somebody in city council, like, for somebody like me who doesn't really know much about that, and I'll be voting for somebody that I think has the ideas. I wouldn't care if somebody tells me what is the solution to my problem, and my problem right now happens to be, childcare, right? Let's talk about childcare. Would somebody like you support, say, government subsidy for women who have to take care of their children? Or would you think, well, that's just not something that the government should do?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
right.
what are the kind of, as a Republican in city council, what are the kind of things that you would support as a spending measure and not bankrupt New York even more? Because I understand there's a deficit, right? So how do we budget?
Right.
So I guess my question, Felicia, is how do we balance the needs that we have, the real needs that we have for people, with the deficit?
That's such an important question. I'm so glad you asked it. Let's start with the budget numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had a $92 billion budget, the highest budget we've ever had, a higher budget than most states have. It went down to $88 billion. We have a growing budget deficit, and we also are losing businesses, and we're losing our population. We just lost a congressional seat. And so these are real problems that are going to continue to create inflation, and our cost of living will rise as a result. I come to the table as a woman, as a mother, as a resident of District 22, and my question is less about what we can cut in terms of looking at the $88 billion budget that we have. I come to the table saying, how do we retain our businesses? How do we reboot? Because we have a tax base that is leaving. How do we keep those children and families here? How do we keep JetBlue, who's in Queens, and they're leaving? They're going to take 1,000 jobs with them. How do we create a business-friendly environment, knowing that our tax base comes from those businesses, which then in turn fund our very important, social services and our city budget. So I try to look at it from a sky view level of hey, we're losing our population, we're losing people because of policies that are not business friendly. So that's the overarching kind of vision of that. And then you have your person specific issues with that as well. There's a lot of people who have health issues. There's a lot of people who are out of work, and we have to certainly get those people back on track and fight for our district. Every single policy that I vote for, I'm going to be asking one question. And when it comes to the budget, the same question as well. How is this empowering people? How is this budget line item that I'm voting on, how is it empowering another person? Because people don't want to just get by, they want to thrive. They want to go from where they are and get to a better place.
Right.
And that's the vision that I bring to my district. That's the vision I bring when I'm sitting across from a constituent. How can I empower them to get to the next step? If childcare is a barrier to starting a business, it's an investment to use a government subsidy to then fund that so that she can go and start her business, and we can help her get connected to resources to do that. So it's less about the ins and outs of, what's the role of government. The question that I ask in this very difficult time where people need help is, how is this budget item empowering my district and empowering other people? And I'll tell you, there's a lot of waste, and there's a lot of corruption, and there's a lot of lack of accountability. And one specific example is Thrive NYC, where money has just gone missing. That's not going to happen when I'm at the table. And I think those are the more important conversations that I'm excited to have, because I want to make our money work for us. And it's not working for it. We don't have basic services that we absolutely should have with an $88 billion budget. That's the conversation I want to have.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's very important for people to understand what they're going to be voting for. And so you articulating your, sort of like your process behind every vote. It shouldn't be, and I agree with you, Felicia, it shouldn't be about, oh, I'm spending too much money, I'm not spending too much money, the role of government should be this, it should be quite honestly, what was good 2 years ago for New York isn't good now after the pandemic, right? So it has to be looked at with very fresh eyes and say, well, how do we, So thank you for that answer. But let's talk about, so a lot of people, especially this week with the anniversary of George Floyd, are remembering and thinking about police, and there's always been talk of fund the police, defund the police. Why are we having this conversation? Shouldn't, in your opinion, should there be something fundamentally different about, and I'm talking about us, NYPD, right? The NYPD is in your district, it's in New York City's district. I'm not talking about just District 22nd. I'm talking about the police in New York City. Should we do something different? Should we be doing something different? Should we be funding them more now that we have rising crime? Or should we be really thinking about more of like, oh, our civil rights are going to be taken away if there's more bullying? What is your take on that?
Yeah, I think starting the conversation of defunding the police is the wrong place to start. I think it caused a lot of division, and I truly believe we have bad apples, but we have one of the most talented, trained, diverse police forces in the country. And so I am proud of the 114 precinct. They do a lot of incredible work. I'm actually the chairwoman of the Interfaith Coalition for Peace and Safety, which was started by Sheikh Musa Drama, an African Muslim leader who is from the Bronx, and he's such an incredible human being. He started this organization, and his heart was connecting the community to public safety officials and creating positive dialogue, working with the officers. So I've done a lot of diaper drives with them. I've done, food drives. We did a turkey giveaway with Ravenswood officers there. And so my whole approach to that is we need to create more positive community and police relationships. And
right.
I think that's a huge problem, especially in some of our more impoverished areas of the city. There's a lack of resources. There's a lack of economic opportunity. There's a lack of access to quality education, to nutrition. There's food deserts in a lot of these areas. And so we have to really pour into these communities, and at the same time, we have to create positive relationships with the police. But I'm not a defund the police candidate. I think that's just the wrong place to start, especially with the rise in crime that we're seeing. So, yeah.
Got it. What about defund ICE? Is that something that?
No.
Is that the same thing?
Honestly, that isn't an area that as a city council person that I have a lot of jurisdiction in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Understood. The conversation around it has gone sort of like hand in hand. What do we give the police some sort of, do we give them carte blanche to see who's documented? But we don't have to talk about that. Let's talk about Rikers Island. Rikers Island has always been such an interesting place to me. I've had to go to Rikers Island to talk to clients a lot. And it's always an experience. And my mom actually worked in a place right next to Rikers Island. So I'm somewhat familiar.
Yeah.
Do you, what is your take? What is your stand on what has been suggested before? Let's get rid of Rikers Island. Let's just do away with Rikers Island. And if we get away with Rikers Island, where are all these people going to go? What's the situation there? I mean, it's a very particular, I didn't even know Rikers Island was a separate place for a district.
Yeah.
But it is. So we have to talk about it.
There.
It's like the elephant in the room, Felicia. We must talk about Rikers Island.
Absolutely. Listen, we have a lot of problems at Rikers Island, and it needs to be completely restructured. And we need to work on our rehabilitation system in general. And we have, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have about a 63% recidivism rate in New York City. So we have to do something when it comes to getting people. People are there to serve their time. Actually, they're not there to serve their time. They're awaiting trial, right? A lot of these individuals. So the conditions there they're not acceptable. And one of the things that I think should be created is a separate entity that's actually auditing our jails. And they should be able to come in at any time and make sure that the conditions are humane, that there's heat or air, that people are getting access to their medication, that the conditions, again, are humane, because this isn't a prison, it is a jail. And so I absolutely believe that there needs to be reform on the island. As far as shutting the island down and creating community-based jails, I'm not on board with that. We talked about the budget deficit,
right?
And I don't think we have the funding for that. I think that needs to go in other places, and we can spend less with reforming the island, and also, you know, just putting community-based jails in the middle of residential areas. I'm not sure that's the safest step forward, especially with the rise in crime.
Right, right. And Felicia, what? Let's talk a little bit about the housing. You know, the housing crisis, which, of course, also always leads me to talk about the empty lots for the businesses that have left, right?
Yes.
Number one, what are we going to do about luring businesses back? And making affordable housing is something that is a wide, you know, a citywide situation, right? Like there's just not that much affordable housing, but affordable housing, number one, and the commercial spaces that are vacant, and how are we going to make those affordable? How do we sort of convince? Because when I think about this with this issue, do we convince the landlords to, you know, do we give them subsidies? What do we need to do to? Because I feel like one of the big issues here is that the rent is too damn high, even for businesses to stay, right? And so I understand it from both perspectives, but what is your take on that situation, which I think it's one of the problems that we as a city face.
Right, absolutely. It's going to be really interesting to see where everything falls with, you know, our population leaving. I think we're already starting to see some of the prices going down on housing, on commercial spaces as well, because a lot of things are empty because people have left.
Right.
So I think we'll see sort of a natural adjustment in price there. But what I'll say is we have a lot of empty commercial spaces. I'll start with the first point you made of, like, how do we refill those spaces and rent, and what does that look like? You know, there's a lot of moving pieces in this argument, or discussion rather. And for me specifically, I'm thinking about how to refill those commercial spaces. And I hinted at this earlier, but attached to my office or in the district, I'd like to have an incubator space that's actually helping start local businesses, like entrepreneurs, people who have ideas can come, they can, you know, grow their business in an incubator space, and we can refill those commercial spaces, hopefully with some of the businesses that have come from our community.
Right.
So I think within my district, because of the cost, you know, going up for rent, you're seeing a lot of the small mom and pops, they have to shut down. And then, you know, some of the franchises are coming in, and people feel like they're losing their neighborhood in some regard. So that's certainly an issue that we have to tackle. But I think landlords have to be a part of that conversation. And, you know, going to the housing issue, a lot of the landlords that are in my districts are small landlords. They're people, this is their source of income, this is their retirement, you know.
Right.
And so when there's like a rent freeze and they're not receiving that, you know, they're hurt as well. So to your point of whatever solution we come up with, we can't leave landlords out of the discussion, because it's certainly not fair to them. They've invested, you know, their life savings into something, and they're hurting.
They have to pay their mortgage too. Some of them have still a lot of mortgages to go, and even though there's relief there for them.
Right, exactly. So there's certainly a lot to work through, but I think, you know, I also see this as an opportunity. It's a very, very dark side, but at the same time, there's an opportunity for growth here because you can get, negotiate your lease a little bit more, maybe try to get a longer term lease with a certain price. This is the time to start a business if we give the proper resources. And so that part of it makes me excited.
Right. Yeah. You have a lot, you have a lot of room for negotiation now. It's certainly a market for you if you want to rent, if you want to get into a lease as a, I would say also as a renter. I mean, it's not going to,
exactly.
Everyone is negotiating, perks and things like that. And
exactly. Exactly. So, the cost, I mean, like you said, the cost of living here, it's very difficult to raise a family and, and still, especially with the quality education that you're receiving, a lot of people, decide to leave. We have to change that. And I think this is the time to have those conversations. And you talked about affordable housing as well. We have to get to a place where there's more truly affordable housing for people that need it. And, we'll certainly work together with the community to do that.
That's great. And we talked a little bit about transportation, right? There's been a lot of talk about transportation. You guys, you guys get the 7 train, right? There's a 7 train.
The N&W line, I think, yeah.
The N&W line, yeah. Are there would you have any plans for any sort of, revamping of, I know that District 22, I know that this is what I know, the N of the R are better than the 7 because everyone that I talk to just despises being on the 7 line.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, we do have a bit of the 7 that runs through. My lens is always, Ditmar's train station and the W line. But yeah, I think, I find this such an interesting time because when everything was shut down, I said this to my husband, why isn't this the time that they're revamping the subway?
There was no one there.
No one's there. So why don't we, if I was the mayor right now, I'd say, okay, what do we need to fix within our system? Because typically you have to shut down the whole subway station, which then impacts all the businesses in the area.
Right.
If we want to fight for accessibility, for, elevators and all these things, why don't we do this stuff now when everything's shut down? But that didn't happen, right? So I wish we would have leveraged that time a little bit.
There's a deficit with the MTA too, isn't there? There's a gigantic deficit but this deficit has been talked about forever and ever. I mean, ever since I remember, it's like, oh, the MTA is about to go bankrupt. Well, the MTA it wasn't a pandemic thing, I don't think. This has been going on for a long time. You guys have a ferry up there, though, don't you?
We do. Yes, we do, which is great. I think just more, we have a few transportation deserts within our district, especially in the East Elmhurst area. Yeah. And so, we had a few bus rerouting plans that came through, and some people were upset about that. So I think just finding ways to bring the community into those discussions and, making sure that we have the ability to help people get around the city, get around the district a little better, but certainly improving our public transportation. I always get I have a story where my son used to go to PS 85 when he was in kindergarten. And so I always tried to catch the bus with it, but the bus always passed our stop for some reason. And so I've heard a lot of frustration with that, especially in transportation deserts. The bus is not always stopping, and they weren't always full either. So I think, having those discussions of, fixing some of those things to incentivize people. Is it a day a week that public transportation's, free? Whatever that looks like, how do we get people to use, get back to utilizing our public transportation?
Right.
There's a huge barrier right now, of course, with COVID and
yeah. And I noticed today that the trains are getting full. Today, precisely this morning, I was on the train. I was on the J train, and it was packed. And I was like, "Oh my God, I have not seen this in a year." Yeah. So things are definitely starting to move, and people are going to start. People who don't. I mean, in New York City, we really have very little choice. We have to ride public transportation, otherwise you're not going to get to where you want to go on time.
Exactly.
We all know that. Felicia, and ranked choice voting. you and I also talked to this a little bit, but I just want to clear this up for people that want to vote for you, for example, because I've already said it on my Facebook lives a few times. And you agree with me. We are on the same page about this. Ranked choice voting. When people go vote, what is the difference between this system and the system that we used to have before? That if you were to explain it to somebody who doesn't know,
absolutely,
what should they be looking out for? Why is this different? And what shouldn't do?
Absolutely. So ranked choice voting is when you actually go to vote, you can rank your top candidates. And so you can put your most likable, the person that you like the most is your number one. If you prefer, a second candidate or third candidate or fourth candidate after that person, however many candidates there are, you can actually, you can vote by ranking them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for example. You can also just vote for the one person that you like. You could just mark 1 for the candidate that you want to vote for. If you don't know anything about all the other candidates, don't do the ranked choice voting, just, mark your 1. The conversation that we had, and I kind of stand behind this statement as well, is I think this is a really confusing time to roll this out. There is a language barrier. I think there's already barriers to people going to vote, especially in this season. Adding one more layer to that, I don't think is the best move for the city. But nonetheless, we have it, so it's good to educate yourself on. I hope it incentivizes people to at least get to know all the candidates a little bit better.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm worried that it's going to create a barrier to vote, or that people are going to go in to vote and be a little confused.
Right. Yeah. And I agree completely. I think we have to be, to the extent that anyone out there wants to explain to their mother, to their immigrant mother, like I did, like I had to, about what it means and how not to make the mistake of, for example, circling the same person 5 times, or something like that. That's not gonna, it's gonna be a waste of time for everybody if you do that, and it has to be explained. And I hope that there are pamphlets out there. I haven't seen them, but I hope that people are reading, or at the very least asking the folks at the polling stations what, not who to vote for, but how to vote. Right?
And I believe this is only for the primary. So
only for the primary.
That's my understanding. So I think it would be a little too confusing, especially for the general election. But I believe it's just for the primary.
Right. Because we're not, we have in the primaries, you're going to be voting for a few people, and in the actual elections, you're going to be voting for 2 people, right? You're going to be voting for whoever, right? Am I right about this?
Yeah, like you'll vote for like city council, public, mayor, all those things.
Right.
But you're not going to have multiple candidates on the same line. So that's with primary. That's where the ranked choice voting comes in, when you have multiple people on the same party line. Exactly.
It's like when we voted for when Democrats voted for everybody from Joe Biden to all the 500 people that were on the primaries before or the Republicans too, right? The Republicans had many folks too that were in the primaries. Felicia, thank you so much. Is there anything that, oh look, Manuel has a team. Felicia's running as candidate represent Astoria, Jackson. If anybody's listening and they want to donate, here is Felicia's website. I don't know if you're looking for people to come and canvas with you and knock doors with you, if you're looking for volunteers, if you look for donations, here's Felicia's. Is there anything else that you would want people to know about why they should vote for you? Why should they vote for Felicia when there's 7 other people? We've heard you, and you've told us, but is there anything that you haven't told us that you should?
Yeah, I think, it goes back to the people before politics for me. It's not about political party. It's about the fight for real representation. And the advantage that I have in this is that there's no other Republican running, and that Republicans don't tend to run in this area. So I'm independent of that, in that I get to just fight for my community. And I think that's the difference. That's going to be the difference between myself and all the other candidates, is I'm going to be representing the true needs of the community. I'm going to be putting people before politics, people first, always. And that's what I think. I hope people will resonate with that message in such a divisive time. We're gonna rebuild. We are going to come back so much stronger. And I'm excited to work very, very hard for my district to make sure that everybody has the best opportunity to rise.
Amazing, Felicia. Thank you so much. I think, I love that you're running. I love that we should have some diversity. We should have more Republicans in city council. We should have more women. We should have more mothers. And you're sort of like that person in one. If you wanted to see a Republican, a mother, and a woman, you've got Felicia.
Exactly. Well, Felicia, I like, maybe I should change my slogan. I love that.
Anyway, Felicia, it was so lovely to talk to you.
Right. Okay.
Muchísimas gracias a todos por vernos hoy. Estuvimos hablando con Felicia Kalan de su plataforma, de lo que va a hacer por el distrito de Astoria, Jackson Heights, East Elmhurst y Rikers Island. Y le agradecemos muchísimo a Felicia por estar aquí con nosotros hablando de las cosas que son importantes, ¿no? La única republicana por postularse, que para ella es bastante importante porque no tiene mucha competencia en cuanto a asociación política, ¿no? Muchas gracias a todos. Nos vemos la próxima semana para otro episodio de Charlas con Lina. Buenas noches a todos. Thank you so much, Felicia. And,
a todos. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.